It was bad enough when we only had to worry about the mainstream media distorting facts and underreporting the news. Now we also have to stomach left-wing and right-wing zealots polluting the airwaves with propaganda disguised as news. Here we'll be going over the real facts about crime in the United States, and for the purpose of this video, we'll be using statistics and data from 2008 because of course 2010 isn't even over yet, and data from 2009 is still being analyzed. In 2008, there were about 304 million people in America. About 242 million were white, about 39 million were black, and about 17 million would be considered other. To look at that in a chart, about 13% were classified as black, and those who were classified as white, 81%. For the purpose of this review, we're going to get all of our statistics from the FBI's UCR and also from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the BJS. Videos on YouTube pervert facts and make it seem as if there's a rash of black men raping white women. Interracial crime is very rare, and crime in general is not at all what people are reporting. It's actually the opposite of what the mainstream news is reporting, and the opposite of what some of these radical groups have been portraying in their videos. And I'm going to back everything up with statistics and facts here. Let's start with what everybody wants to know: the murder rate. Now for this part, we're just going to look at murder. This has nothing to do with the rest of the homicides. This is on the FBI's website, and I'm going to just
read it directly as it says it here. This is the FBI Uniform Crime Reporting Program, which defines murder and non-negligent manslaughter as the willful, non-negligent killing of one human being by another. The classification of this offense is based solely on police investigation, as opposed to determination of a court, medical examiner, coroner, jury, and other judicial body. The UCR program does not include the following situations in this offenses classification: deaths caused by negligence, suicide, accidents, justifiable homicides, and attempts to murder or assault murder, which are scored as aggravated assaults. So this is just dealing with murders. An estimated 16,272 persons were murdered nationwide in 2008. This number was a 3.9% decrease from the 2007 estimate, and a 0.8% increase from the 2004 figure, and a 4.8% increase from the 1999 estimate. There were an estimated 5.4 murders per 100,000 inhabitants in 2008, a 4.7 decrease from the estimated 2007 rate. 89.4% of the murders that occurred in the United States in 2008 were within metropolitan areas, 6.3% were in non-metropolitan counties, and a remainder, 4.3%, occurred in cities outside metropolitan areas. Justifiable homicides are defined as certain willful killings and must be reported as justifiable or excusable. In the UCR program, justifiable homicides are defined and limited to the killing of a felon by a peace officer in the line of duty, the killing of a felon during the commission of a felony by a private citizen.
As far as just the murder victims, there were 14,180 total murders. Just murders. Remember, we went over that chart, so this doesn't include certain things like justifiable homicides, things that are in that other figure that made up that 16,000 number. There were a total of 14,180 murders. The vast majority were males, 11,059, and 3,078 were female. For the white population, almost half of the murders in the country were white, 6,838 murders. Of that 6,000, 4,934 were white males. Of that, 1,903 were white females. Of the black population, 6,782 were blacks, 5,752 were black males, 1,028 were black females. Other races, we got 321 for total, 215 for males, 116 for females, and where the race was unknown, we have a total of 239. So how would that look if we were to try to put this in perspective for murder? I made a chart here that I call the ring of murder. The inner circle is the United States Census, and then we see the outer ring is homicides. So blacks made up 13% of the population, but they made up again nearly half. They both equaled 48%. We got 13% of the population here making up 48% of the murders. And then you have 81% of the population here making up 48% of the murder. And 6% of the population figured out ways to not get murdered. as much. And if I was to break this down even more, it would be impossible to read on most monitors, especially when we look at groups like black males, which make up around 6% of the total US population, but 41% of the murders. For example, black males 20 to 24 are less than one half of 1% of the total population, but with over 1,000 murders, they're nearly 10% of murders. And the numbers are even more contrast when we look at even smaller groups like black males ages 17 to 19, which are about 1/4 of 1% of the total US population, which is technically 0% of the population, yet they account for 5% of the total murders. And for black youths ages 20 to 24, we have a situation where a very small percentage of the population, less than 1% to be exact, count for over 10% of the total murders. When we compare data on offenders and victims, we see that there are more offenders than victims. This is for several reasons. Commonly, in murder cases, there can be more than one person convicted of a single murder. Also, black males are about 4 times more likely to be prosecuted as co-defendants in murder cases. Oftentimes, when the offenders are black, 3 or more individuals are tried and convicted of a single murder. So when we see that there are more black offenders here than white offenders in Table 3, it doesn't necessarily mean blacks are responsible for more of the murders. Again, this data is based off of information obtained by law enforcement only. Determination of courts could not be included in annual reports, especially in the instance of murder, because in many cases the actual trial dates can be years after initial arrest. There's no statute of limitation for murder cases, so murders can be acted upon many years after the actual occurrences. So even though in about 1/3 of the murder investigations, officers were not able to obtain basic information on the suspect, such as age, sex, or race of the offenders, those cases can be closed in the future. Moving on to Table 6, we'll find many more details. These are the cases where officers were able to obtain good information on many of the murders. Of the 6,782 murders where the victims were white, law enforcement agencies were able to gather specific data in 3,643 of the cases, which is about 53.3%. Of the 6,782 murders where the victims were black, officers were able to obtain a good deal of information on 3,024, roughly 44.6% of the black murders. As far as males, where murder was concerned, of the 11,059 male murder cases, 4,909, or 44% of all male murders, were cases where officers were able to obtain a good deal of information. Females had the highest percentage with 1,931 of the total 3,078 murders. Officers were able to obtain good information in 62.7% of all the murders. So from the data here, it's safe to conclude that when a murder victim was female and white, officers were able to obtain the most information from their investigation. 62% of all the female murders where officers were able to obtain a good deal of information were committed by white individuals. Since females were only murdered by other females 200 times that year, we know that most white females are murdered by white males. This is pretty solid evidence against the videos that have been spreading around on the internet stating that large numbers of black males are killing white females. Those videos are using information supplied by white supremacy organizations, and the news only reporting certain crimes is all about profits. The most lucrative market for advertisers is Caucasian females 18 to 49. The news or infotainment can make more money by selling airtime for commercials if they can get white women to tune into their programming. The media will try to scare you into watching the news. The big problem here is so many people end up believing things are not as they truly are. This creates a false sense of reality that leads to ignored crises, and resources end up channeled towards fictional problems. Black males are 6% of the population, but 60% of verified cases of false rape and murder convictions. Over 150 black males have been proven innocent by DNA since 1990 after serving an average of 13 years in prison. The American media does a great disservice to the psyche of those it claims to serve by making those in the least danger the most fearful, and those the most vulnerable the most feared and fearless. In other words, they have some young black males walking around like they're bulletproof, and everybody else is in danger mode with hair triggers in their presence. In 2008, 41 police officers were killed in the line of duty. That same year, police killed a minimum of 371 people. The media has most Americans believing the opposite is true. And while we're on the subject of quote-unquote justifiable homicides, between 1976 and 2005, police justifiably killed a minimum of 11,080 people. About 300 were younger than 17 and roughly 2,000 were under 21. Between 1999 and 2008, 530 police officers were killed, and during that same period, 3,576 citizens were justifiably killed by police officers, in addition to 2,206 justifiably killed by citizens. And again, the vast majority of those quote unquote justifiable homicides are black males.